In my recent video about Kailash, which was Portland, Oregon's biggest eco-village by far, I discussed how it could grow, because cities need a lot more places like this if they want to become sustainable. Then an alert reader saw that the adjoining property was also labeled Ecovillage on Google Maps. I did some digging, and you guessed it, the owner of Kailash bought it last year. So it happened, and sooner than expected, Portland, Oregon's eco-village population just nearly tripled. I came across these two one-hour interviews of Kailash founder Ole Ersson, and the amount of information was a little bit overwhelming. But not to worry, as a permaculture urbanist and eco-village co-founder, I'll give you a side-by-side comparison of Ole's two properties, discuss what it really takes to turn an old building into a new eco-village, and how rental eco-villages like this can Edenize cities much faster. Welcome to Edenicity, best practices for sustainably abundant cities. Let's start with Kailash. When Ole purchased the 1.6-acre property in 2007, the site was very run down. There were two buildings on it, a 1926 house and a 1959 30-unit apartment building. It had some amenities, a shared laundry, and a large parking lot, which the community later depaved to make room for the garden that you see right here. Since the purchase, the Kailash community has planted a food forest, multiple types of composting, created 41 individual garden plots, installed solar power, rainwater catchment sufficient to irrigate the whole property through the very dry Portland summer, and added the all-important wood chip depot to provide organic material to build soil throughout the gardens. This is a highly desirable property with a wait list of over 200 people and rents ranging from $500 for a single room in the shared house to about $1,100 for a one-bedroom apartment. And just for reference, market rate in Portland is about $1,400 for a one-bedroom. Annapurna was purchased in May of 2023. The lot is about twice as big, with 5 buildings, built from 1971 through 1977, about evenly split between 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. At purchase, 13 of the units were uninhabitable. Annapurna quadruples the amount of habitable floor area among the two sites, with 5 laundries, each with 2 washers and dryers, and 85 parking spots that will no doubt be partially or fully depaved someday. Apartments in this previously run-down complex go for slightly less than market rate. Now, I want to be clear, it takes enormous amounts of talent and drive to see one project like this to completion in a lifetime, let alone 2. Let's take a more detailed look at Ole Ersson's background and how his experiences prepared him for success with these projects. Ole was raised on a Corvallis, Oregon farm that didn't have a whole lot of money, so he learned frugality, gardening, and general maintenance from a young age. By 1985, he was married to Maitri, who, as near as I can tell, never appears on camera, and the two of them began buying and repairing dilapidated houses, building glorious gardens, and then selling them for a profit. In 1990, Ole started medical school and bought a property right across the street from where he was attending classes. The property was dilapidated, and it cost $22,500. But after fixing it up and living in it for 13 years, Ole and Maitri were able to sell it at market rate for about $300,000. As you can imagine, at this point, they were very competent at home repair and gardening. They had been living as green as possible, even composting their own waste. But they were starting to run into the limits of what they could do as a couple. To take on more ambitious green projects, they realized they needed to work in community. So they became involved with co-housing in Corvallis, Oregon. This was built in a semi-rural environment far from the big city, and reading a little between the lines, it seemed that it had to work extra hard to attract residents due to its non-central location. Ole especially didn't like being so far from the big city, so they became involved with Columbia Co-housing in Portland. Like many eco-villages at the time, Columbia worked on an ownership model, but this environment with the Condo Owners Association and its consensus decision-making process was much too slow for a couple as experienced with green renovations as Ole and Maitri. So on his bus and bicycle commutes to his medical practice, Ole started looking for a new site to purchase. In 2007, he found and bought the site that became Kailash. The bank required a 30% down payment due to the perceived high risk of that property, which had more than its fair share of drug dealers and prostitutes. But as the Erssons started converting it into an eco-village, the unsavory residents started to feel out of place and moved out of their own accord, according to Ole. By the time they bought Kailash in 2007, the Erssons already had 22 years of remodeling and rebuilding and regardening experience as a couple. In 2009, they depaved, that is to say, ripped the asphalt out of a big chunk of their parking lot to convert it into a garden. In 2013, they put 13 kilowatts of solar panels on the roof of the main house and depaved several more parking spaces. In 2020, they added another 33 kilowatts of solar power, providing almost enough energy for the residents and the charging stations for the 3 electric vehicles that the residents shared. In 2021, Kailash's wait list had reached 200. In 2023, the property next door suddenly became available, and the Ersons jumped at it. This was a $7 million purchase, plus a construction loan, and that works out to a hefty $50,000 a month mortgage. Now, to get a sense of the possibilities that the new site, Annapurna, opens, let's take a quick look at how far the first site, Kailash, has come. Kailash has 55 residents, a community kitchen and media center, a guest room, which is great if you're living in a one-bedroom. They installed 96 bike parking spaces, half of which are sheltered. There's even a repair stand, so you can work on your bike without having to own your own set of tools at home. There's 3 shared EVs, which are available well below market rents and with far less paperwork and waiting around. There are 6 EV charging stations. They catch all the rainwater off the roof as well as the parking lot and shunt it through rain gardens that percolated into the shallow aquifer under Portland. During the long dry summers, they use their own well pump to tap that aquifer and withdraw about as much water as they put into it during the rainy winter season. The gardens, which of course include the depaved parking lot, include 41 individual plots, group gardens, a farmer's market profit share, and this is really cool. The community has a professional farmer who takes unclaimed produce from the community plot as well as individual plots. For those community members who contribute labor and produce to this effort, they not only get first pick of the produce that's grown on the property, but they also get about a $400 or $500 share of the profits from sales at farmers market. And speaking as a former market gardener myself, the best part of that is that you can grow your own food and enjoy it and have someone else take the excess and sell it and market for you and bring back the money. What a great deal. And of course, the community provides gardeners with all the tools, mulch, and compost that they need. The gardens have 53 orchard trees and a legal human waste composting system, which about a dozen out of the nearly 60 community members use on a regular basis. By the way, in one of the interviews, Ole said that if the entire community composted human waste, they would have more compost than they would actually be able to use in the gardens. This is a problem that actually can be solved by solving another problem that cities may have as ecovillages grow. All right, let's look at Annapurna, the new property. At purchase, it was plagued by drugs, including an overdose death around the time of closing, shootings, seemingly daily calls to the police, abandoned cars, electric meter thefts, squatters, a unit with multiple pit bulls that were attacking people and other animals, 13 units stripped of toilets, breaker panels, and kitchen cabinets. Now, the Ersons had actually encountered many of these problems together on a much smaller scale with Kailash, so they were ready with a plan and built a $1.2 million remodeling loan into the mortgage. Now, watch how fast the Ersons were able to move. By May of 2024, 12 months later, they had fully remodeled 23 apartments, including flooring, cabinets, and appliances. They had installed energy-efficient windows. Now, this was a major undertaking for which they brought in a strong organizational partner, the Energy Trust of Oregon. They replaced 229 windows with a total project cost of $135,000 and annual energy savings of $25,600. With the incentives and their ability to control costs, their break-even will be just 5 years, and that is really impressive. They were able to fence and gate the whole property, including presumably a planned gate to Kailash. They have full occupancy by the 12-month mark, and although they had budgeted $150,000 in legal fees for potential evictions, they ended up negotiating contracts with those squatters who wanted to stay, and they ended up with just a $500 legal fee. They've installed a corner garden and given their community priority in those individual Kailash garden plots that previously would be available to the neighborhood at large. This strikes me as a really good way to jumpstart the gardening community in the new property. What's next for Annapurna? One of the things that knits together the Kailash community is a really old technology. It's called a listserv. It's just an automated email list that allows many-to-many emails. And I've found them very useful in the past as well with Permaculture Guild in Bloomington, Indiana. In May, they were just starting to put together a permaculture plan, which would include edible landscaping, possibly terraces, and doing something relatively sustainable with the pool. They were thinking maybe water storage. But when I look at it, I think natural swimming pool where you use vascular plants to clean and aerate the water, or maybe even aquaponic gardens. They want to put in free gigabyte internet and community Wi-Fi, which sounds pretty cool, electric vehicle charging stations, plus shared electric vehicles, composting, solar power for sure, possibly wind power. Ole must have stored those 229 windows from the energy upgrade, and he's thinking about using them to build a greenhouse, secure bike parking for both Annapurna and Kailash. And I'm thinking for sure they're going to want to depave at least 40 parking spaces in the short run, and probably a lot more than that in the long run. Now, because I'm not on the ground in that community, I don't know how feasible it would be to put in a community center or a guest room. Really nice features to add as well. Now, let's look at what Kailash and Annapurna can do for cities. I know this doesn't sound like much, but what we're really looking at is a rental eco-village revolution. The fact that these are rental and not co-op or condo properties really positions this concept for growth. Renting removes the affordability barrier of traditional co-housing, and redevelopment on a property like this is much bolder and faster when you're not trying to go through a consensus process with owner associations. These eco-villages also ride three trends. First, Gen Z and millennials are far less interested in detached home ownership and far more interested in apartments and rentals. Second, the new generations are much less interested in owning cars or even learning to drive at a young age. And third, as I've shown in a previous episode, green living is becoming a premium offering in rental markets, meaning that people will pay more to live green. So given this really good positioning, it's not too surprising that Kailash is on track for growth. In the last episode, I ran a couple of scenarios, one where Kailash would basically double every 10 years through buying additional communities. This would Edenize Portland completely by 2160. So that's the slow scenario. And indeed, Kailash is on track with that scenario. They've gone from 40 to 149. Actually, that should be 161 beds in 17 years. So they're ahead of schedule for the easy scenario. What about the tougher scenario? This is the one where they would mentor a new project every year, starting at year 10. So after about 10 years of experience, each ecovillage would mentor a new ecovillage every year. Well, here's where we run into a potential problem. It turns out that mentoring is off the table. I'll let Ole explain why.
We had a lot of people who were inspired by the project and contacted us for ideas on how they could do a project like that on their own. We don't have time to individually walk people through the process. What we try to do is on our webpage, document what we're doing. So that's allowed us to mentor people informally.
Sure. Yeah. Right. This is the site he's talking about. And when I think of documentation, I'm thinking more like procedures manuals, ISO 9000, really fairly detailed stuff. This is like a very nice chronological photo album. And if you really pour through it very carefully, you do get a sense of what might be involved. But there's kind of two mindsets at play here. Ole is a builder. He's been a builder his entire life and has gone very fast and worked very hard at building these skills. For people just starting out, it can be very daunting to know exactly what to do in what sequence. And there's a bit of a disconnect between those two extremes. Even for experienced developers, going green, I think, contains a lot of unknowns. But the bottom line is that Kailash has actually done something that may be better than the mentoring and documentation that I was looking for in that earlier episode, and that is to effectively incubate a new project every year, starting at about year 10. Ole said that at least 6 former residents of Kailash have launched their own eco-villages throughout the country. And apparently some houses across the street got together and created their own co-housing inspired by Kailash as well. So the bottom line is that Kailash is on track for both types of growth. This is a really robust, resilient growth model because the US has over 600,000 residential buildings with 10 or more units already built. That means that hundreds of thousands of eco-village retrofits are just waiting to happen. But you might well ask, why bother? Why would people want to live this way? Let's take the really big picture. Life is abundant where it's layered. That is to say, where there's many living beings between earth and sky. Unfortunately, the way humans have been living recently is through single-layered agriculture and settlements that now occupy about half of the land area of the planet. And not coincidentally, we've wiped out half of the living biomass of the planet. See the links that I provided in the description below. Meanwhile, cities occupy about 3% of the land and house well over half the people on Earth. With best practices from permaculture and urbanism, that is, the layered food systems of permaculture and the shared public amenities such as transportation from urbanism, cities could produce their own food, water, and energy. This in turn would free up some 95% of the land for restoration. Edenicity is permaculture urbanism. So how would ecovillages Edenize cities faster? Well, first, by increasing demand for bikeways, public transit, and multifamily mixed-use development. If people are already living that lifestyle, they will also be the best advocates for more of it. Since mass transit occupies 1/10 of the lane space of car infrastructure, we can depave many streets for forestry and agriculture. Now, permaculture does provide some methods for taking really barren soil and rapidly rehabilitating it with what's called succession plantings. But these areas will do even better if we use the excess ecovillage compost to accelerate the growth. Ecovillages also vastly reduce energy use and demand for wastewater management in all of its forms. In the aggregate, they also do a lot to recharge the shallow aquifer, which helps to create water abundance in most climates. As ecovillages start to spread in cities, they will become far cleaner and quieter because foot traffic is 4 times quieter than car traffic, safer because public transit in the absence of cars is more than 50 times safer, healthier in the absence of polluting chemicals, most of which comes from cars in cities, and most importantly, far less lonely, because as people interact with the landscapes where they live, they naturally begin to interact with each other and form true community, and this connection between individual and landscape and those you share that landscape with is the true basis for community throughout the world. I have been a member of groups that have called themselves community, but the more of your basic needs that are met by the people and land that you share time with, the stronger your community will be. Now, since you're still here, you're probably wondering how you can be part of something like this. You can check ic.org for rental urban ecovillages in your area. And apologies in advance, there are just not that many of them. You can join Edenicity for free as a patron for more news and how-to about urban ecovillage development. You can work to transform your own neighborhood into an ecovillage. I provided a greener village blueprint for doing just that to help you get started that you can find in the description below. And by the way, it's not a very glossy document, but don't underestimate it. There's also a video linked right next to it that walks you through the process. Now, if you're an urban planner or a multifamily developer who's interested in ecovillage development, you're actually going to face a bit of a conundrum. The people who are the most experienced in this area are too busy basically building their communities and not that interested, as you saw, in spending time bringing other people up to speed. What's worse, permaculturists have generally been focused on homesteads, mainly rural, sometimes urban, but not on big commercial projects. And there's a built-in skepticism of cities that you'll find throughout the permaculture community. But I've planted my flag here with Edenicity as a permaculture urbanist, so if you want to do these kinds of projects in cities, hit me up, let's talk. I know a lot of people are not necessarily looking forward to 2025, but I hope today gave you a sense of optimism going forward. Rental ecovillages are a game changer, and I look forward to a lot more people finding their way into something like this. Here's that document that I was talking about. You can download below. Thanks so much to the patrons for supporting this work, and here's how you can learn more about Edenicity. Wishing you prosperity and success in the coming year. Take care, stay green. See you next time.